During my divorce, while I was pregnant, I handed over all my property to my husband. When the judge learned my reason, he applauded me standing. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The courtroom filled with the murmur of voices. Sarah sat on the wooden bench, her hands resting on her rounded belly. 5 months pregnant, and it was taking its toll. Her back ached, her feet were swollen in simple flat shoes. She'd deliberately chosen a modest gray dress. No makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Let him see an ordinary pregnant woman, tired and worn down. Across from her, at the defendant's table, sat Michael in a suit worth $10,000. Tanned, fit, self-satisfied. Next to him sat an expensive attorney in glasses, shuffling through papers. Michael leaned over to him, whispered something, and they both smirked, looking in her direction. "All rise. Court is now in session," announced the clerk. Everyone stood. Judge Maria Reynolds, a woman in her 50s with a penetrating gaze, took her seat. She surveyed the room, her eyes pausing on Sarah's pregnant belly, then shifting to the prosperous-looking Michael. "We are here for the case regarding the division of marital property between Sarah and Michael Anderson," she began. "Plaintiff is Sarah and Anderson. Defendant is Michael James Anderson. Let's proceed." Michael's attorney stood, confidently arranging documents before him. "Your Honor, my client insists on a fair division of property. During 8 years of marriage, the couple acquired a downtown apartment valued at $2 million, a vacation home in the Hamptons for $800,000, 2 vehicles totaling $200,000, and savings of $1 million. All of this was acquired solely through my client's labor. The plaintiff has not worked for the past 5 years and has been a homemaker." The judge looked at Sarah. "What do you have to say about this?" Sarah slowly rose, supporting her lower back with one hand. "I agree with the list of assets, but as for who acquired it all, my husband did earn the money, but at his insistence I left my job as a paralegal to be a housewife." Michael snorted. "What kind of paralegal? You were making copies at a law office for $2,000 a month. I supported you your whole life." "Defendant," the judge snapped. "Speak only through your attorney." Sarah continued calmly. "I'm prepared to discuss the division. I have a proposal." The judge nodded. Michael's attorney tensed. Michael himself leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, waiting for more feminine whining. "I'm waiving all claims to jointly acquired property," Sarah stated clearly and loudly. Silence hung in the courtroom, then exploded with Michael's laughter. He jumped up, slapping his palm on the table. "Now that's a twist. She broke. I told you she'd eventually understand who she was dealing with." His attorney tried to calm him, but Michael was on cloud 9. He pulled out his phone, quickly tapped out a message. Sarah could see the screen. He was texting Christina, his mistress. "It's all mine." The idiot gave everything away. "We'll celebrate tonight." Judge Reynolds frowned. "Mrs. Anderson, you understand that you're giving up assets worth over $4 million? You're pregnant. You need housing, means of support." "I understand, Your Honor." Sarah pulled a folder of documents from her bag. "Here's my written waiver of claims to the apartment, vacation home, vehicles, and savings. I ask that everything listed be considered the property of Michael James Anderson." She walked to the clerk's table and placed the documents down. Her hands didn't tremble. Her face remained calm, almost indifferent, as if she were giving up not millions but old furniture. Michael grabbed his phone and recorded video of Sarah signing the waivers. Perfect. Recorded for posterity. So she can't say later that she was forced. His attorney also looked puzzled. He hadn't expected such an easy victory. Usually divorces dragged on for months. Women fought for every penny, especially pregnant ones. But this one just gave up. The judge studied the documents, shook her head. Mrs. Anderson, I'm obligated to verify no one is forcing you into this decision. You're acting voluntarily. Completely voluntarily, Your Honor. I want to end this marriage as quickly as possible and start a new life. Let my husband keep the property. I only need my personal belongings and child support. Michael laughed even louder. Child support. Of course. She wants to squeeze at least something out of me. The judge looked at him sternly. Child support is your direct obligation as a father. 25% of income for one child. Any objections? The attorney quickly whispered something to Michael. He waved dismissively. No objections. Let her get her child support. I'm not greedy. After another half-hour of formalities, it was all over. The judge announced the decision. The marriage is dissolved. All jointly acquired property transfers to the ownership of Michael James Anderson. Sarah and Anderson receives child support for the child in the amount of 25% of the former spouse's official income. Michael walked out of the courtroom triumphantly. In the corridor, Christina was already waiting for him, a tall blonde in a tight dress. They kissed right in front of everyone. Christina squealed with delight. Michael, I'm so proud of you. You did it. Now it's all ours. I told you she'd eventually give in. Now we're going to Prague to celebrate properly. Sarah walked past them without raising her eyes. But at the exit from the courthouse, she turned and said quietly but loud enough for Michael to hear, Congratulations! Now it's all truly yours. There was no anger in her voice, no regret, only a strange calmness. Michael didn't even notice, caught up in his celebration plans. Sarah got into an old Honda that her friend had loaned her and drove across the city. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Lisa. Well, has it started? Yes, Sarah replied. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Everything's ready. She put the phone on the passenger seat and looked at herself in the rear-view mirror. A tired face, dark circles under her eyes, but her eyes were burning. For the first time in many years, they were burning. 8 years ago, Sarah had met Michael at a mutual friend's office party. She was 22, he was 27. She'd just gotten her paralegal certificate and landed a job at a small law firm. He was already busy growing his business, construction materials trading. Michael knew how to make an impression. Expensive car, restaurants, flowers every week. He talked about big plans, about how he'd build an empire. Sarah listened, admired. He seemed so strong, confident, successful. After 6 months, they got married, modest but beautiful. They moved into a rented 2-bedroom, started saving for their own place. The first 3 years were happy. Michael's business grew. They bought their first apartment in a new development on the outskirts, then sold it, took out a mortgage, and moved downtown. Sarah worked, brought home her modest salary. At first, Michael was grateful. Then he started making jokes. Your $2,000? That barely covers our Starbucks for a week. When Sarah turned 25, Michael suddenly announced, Enough of this office work. Stay home, take care of the house. A wife should create a home, not run around offices. I'm embarrassed in front of my partners. Everyone else's wives are proper homemakers, and mine is shuffling paper somewhere. Sarah resisted. She liked her work. She dreamed of becoming a paralegal, then maybe even a lawyer. But Michael pressured and manipulated. What, you don't trust me? Think I can't provide for you? You want to show that I'm a bad husband, can't support a family. Eventually she gave in, quit, stayed home. The first few months she tried to find herself in household chores, but it brought no satisfaction. She missed work, missed the feeling of being valued. Then the affairs began. At first Sarah didn't want to believe it. Late nights at work, weekend business trips, new expensive clothes with unfamiliar perfumes. She tried to bring it up, but Michael would explode. I have a business. I'm earning money while you sit here within 4 walls, and you dare make accusations. Once Sarah found text exchanges on his phone with his secretary, Vicky. explicit photos, plans for hotel meetings. She showed him, demanded explanations. Michael didn't deny it, just shrugged. So what? A man needs variety. You're not going anywhere anyway. That hurt most, not the affair itself, but that indifferent, not going anywhere anyway. He was certain she'd never leave, because without work, without her own money, without housing, where would she go? Sarah tried to get pregnant, thought maybe a baby would change everything, bring her husband back to the family. But it was difficult. 2 miscarriages early on. Doctors said stress, nerves. Michael didn't particularly care. You'll have one eventually. You're not going anywhere. His constant phrase, you're not going anywhere. Where would you even go? Who needs you? He seemed to be hammering into her head the idea of her own worthlessness. In front of his friends, he allowed himself humiliating jokes. My wife knows how to do a lot of things, but earning money isn't on the list. But she makes a decent pot roast. Everyone laughed. Sarah sat, stone-faced, wishing to sink through the floor. The last 2 years, Christina appeared, young, ambitious. Michael didn't even hide his relationship with her. He'd come home with her marks on his shirt collar. When Sarah objected, he'd respond coldly, if you don't like it, leave. Just don't forget that the apartment is mine. The vacation home is mine. The car is mine. You'll go to a studio apartment on the outskirts. Go live there. But 6 months ago, a miracle happened. Sarah got pregnant again. And this time the pregnancy held. 1 month, 2, 3. She was afraid to be happy. Every day she expected it to fail. But the baby held on strong, developing on schedule. Michael reacted unexpectedly. Finally, maybe you'll give me a son, at least an heir. Sarah was thrilled. Thought now he'd come to his senses. Leave Christina, become a normal husband and father. But when she was in her 4th month, Michael came home and dryly announced, file for divorce. I need to live with Christina. She's young, promising. You've served your time. Have the baby, I'll pay child support. Don't expect more than that. Just like that, 8 years of marriage ended with a brief, you've served your time. Sarah filed for divorce and immediately learned that Michael was demanding to keep all the property for himself, giving her only child support. His attorney prepared documents proving that everything was acquired solely through Michael's labor, while Sarah contributed nothing to the family budget. At one of the pre-trial hearings, Michael's attorney stated directly, my client's wife sat at home, spent her husband's money, didn't work. What contribution did she make? None. Therefore, the property should remain with the defendant. Sarah sat there understanding they were right from a legal standpoint. She had no proof of her contribution. Her labor as a homemaker was barely recognized by law, and Michael knew this perfectly well. Then, about 3 months ago, something happened that changed everything. Sarah was sitting in the small rented room where she'd moved after Michael kicked her out of the apartment. He had the right. The apartment was in his name, bought before the marriage. Technically, she wasn't on the deed, had no rights. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Sarah Anderson? This is Notary Anna Peterson. You need to come see me urgently. It's about your grandmother's estate. Sarah was bewildered. Grandmother? Her maternal grandmother was still alive and well in Florida. I'm sorry, which grandmother? Your grandmother, Maria Victoria Cole. She passed away a month ago and left a will. You're named as an heir. Maria Victoria. That was her great-aunt, technically. Sarah had seen her only a few times at family holidays. The old woman always seemed stern, not very talkative. She had no children of her own. She devoted her whole life to work, managed a chain of pharmacies in several cities. The next day, Sarah went to the notary's office. Anna Peterson turned out to be a pleasant woman in her 50s. She invited Sarah into her office, seated her, poured tea. You're probably surprised, the notary began. Maria Victoria kept the will secret. She didn't advertise her wealth, lived modestly. What wealth? Sarah asked quietly. Anna Peterson handed over a folder of documents. A chain of pharmacies, Farm Plus, in 5 states. 23 locations total. By preliminary estimate, the business is worth approximately $18 million. Sarah's vision darkened. She gripped the armrests to keep from falling. 18 million? Yes, plus an apartment in Manhattan, 2 condos in other cities, savings. In total, you're inheriting about 20 million. After taxes, approximately 18 million will remain. Sarah couldn't speak. 18 million. She, whom her husband had thrown out, who was living in a rented room for $1,200 a month, had suddenly become the owner of a fortune. There's something else. The notary handed her an envelope. Maria Victoria left you a letter. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. Her great-aunt's familiar handwriting, firm and even. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this letter, I'm already gone. Forgive me for not meeting more often. I watched your life from afar. I saw you marry that Michael. Even then, I understood what kind of person he was. I saw his look when he assessed my house, my car, when he asked about my affairs. He was looking for advantage. I wanted to warn you, but you were in love. You wouldn't have listened. I deliberately kept the secret. I knew that if Michael found out about my wealth, he'd immediately attach himself to me, play the loving grandson-in-law, and then after my death start claiming a share of the inheritance through you. I didn't want my life's work going to that greedy wretch. Now the business is yours. Do with it what you want. But remember, you're a strong, smart woman. You don't deserve humiliation. Live with dignity and don't let anyone use you. Your great-aunt Maria. Sarah read the letter 3 times. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her great-aunt had known, had seen, and had protected her the only way she could, by keeping the inheritance secret until the very end. When can I claim the inheritance? Sarah asked, wiping away tears. We'll process all the documents in a week. But there's a nuance. The notary looked at her seriously. You'll receive the inheritance as an individual after the divorce is final. It will be your personal property, not subject to division. But if your husband finds out about the inheritance before the divorce is finalized, he might try to contest it, drag out the process. He won't find out, Sarah said firmly. No one will find out. She left the notary's office a different person. The world had changed. An hour ago, she'd been a broke, pregnant woman abandoned by her husband. Now, she owned a business and a multimillion-dollar fortune. But the main thing wasn't that. The main thing, she now had a choice, the ability to protect herself and her future child. And then Sarah remembered her profession, paralegal. She'd finished legal studies, worked at a law firm, knew the law. Let Michael think she was a helpless housewife. Let him think he'd won. She would develop a plan, one where his greed would work against him. The next day, Sarah met with her friend Lisa. Lisa worked as an investigator in economic crimes. They'd been friends since college. They met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts. Lisa arrived with a thick folder. You won't believe what I found. Lisa laid the folder on the table. Your husband is quite the piece of work. Sarah opened the folder. Bank statements, certified copies of loan agreements, expert conclusions. Over the past 2 years, Michael has taken out loans in your name totaling $3 million, Lisa began. Did you know about this? What? Sarah went pale. Here are the agreements. They have your signature. Or rather, what's supposed to be your signature. Sarah took the agreements and began studying them. The signatures looked very similar to hers. But this isn't my signature, she whispered. Lisa, I didn't sign these. I know. I already sent the documents for analysis. Preliminary conclusion. 19 of the 22 signatures are forgeries. 3 are genuine, those you actually signed. Remember. Sarah remembered. A year and a half ago, Michael had brought some papers. Sign these. It's for the IRS, a formality. You're my wife. I need your signature as a co-borrower. She'd signed without looking, trusting her husband. Thought it really was just a formality. He forged the rest, Lisa continued. He took out loans in your name, provided false income statements for you, said you worked remotely, earned $12,000 a month. But I haven't worked anywhere. Haven't worked anywhere for 5 years. Exactly. The statements are fake. The signatures are forged. This is fraud under federal law. Up to 20 years in prison. Sarah looked at the documents in disbelief. $3 million in debt in her name. While she sat at home, cooked his dinners, and washed his shirts, he was taking out loans, forging her signatures. Where did the money go? She asked. Lisa turned the page. Bank card statements, photographs. Part went to saving his business. He had problems with the IRS, large penalties. Part went to Christina. She showed receipts. He's renting her an apartment for $3,000 a month. Gifts, a bracelet for $20,000, a ring for $30,000, a trip to Turkey for $40,000. All on credit money taken out in your name. Sarah silently looked at the photographs. Michael with Christina at restaurants, hotels, at the beach, happy, satisfied. And at that time, she was sitting in a rented room, counting pennies for food. Lisa, he was supporting his mistress on my debts. Sarah's voice trembled, not from weakness, but from fury. Yes, and now the banks want their money back. Payments are 3 months overdue. They'll soon start filing lawsuits. Against you. Technically, the loans are in your name. But I have a plan. Lisa pulled out another folder. The forensic analysis will confirm the forged signatures. I have your medical records. On the dates some of these loans were taken out, you were hospitalized on bed rest. You physically couldn't have been at the bank. So I can prove this is fraud. Not just can, you must. Otherwise, these debts will hang on you. And you're pregnant, without work, without money. They'll declare you bankrupt, seize all assets. Although, wait, what assets do you have now? Sarah took a deep breath. None. In court, I waived all claims. All property goes to Michael. Lisa stared at her in amazement. You gave up the apartment, the vacation home, the cars? Everything. Have you lost your mind? Why? Sarah leaned closer, lowering her voice. Because the property and the debts are connected. If the property goes to him, then the loan obligations should transfer too, right? Lisa's mouth fell open, then slowly closed. Her eyes widened. Article 1692 of the Civil Code. Transfer of rights and obligations. Sarah, you're a genius. I'm just a paralegal who hasn't worked in 5 years, but hasn't forgotten the law. Sarah stroked her belly. He thinks I'm weak and stupid, that he beat me. But I just gave him enough rope to hang himself. But there's a nuance, Lisa frowned. The banks have to agree to pursue the debt from him, not you. Technically, the agreements are in your name. That's why we need to act quickly, while Michael is celebrating his victory and doesn't understand what's happening. File a police report about fraud with forged signatures, forensic analysis, proof of my alibi, and in parallel, contact the banks with an explanation of the situation. Lisa nodded. Tomorrow I'll take the materials to the prosecutor's office. I have connections there. They'll open a case quickly, and you prepare a statement to the banks. Explain that the signatures are forged, that the property used as collateral for the loans now belongs to Michael. Was the apartment collateral? Not all of it, just your share. But now the whole apartment is his. So the debts should be his too. Sarah felt a cold triumph spreading inside her. She wasn't taking revenge. She was simply using the law. Exactly as they'd taught in school. The law should protect the innocent and punish the guilty. There's something else. Lisa lowered her voice. I dug into his business correspondence. Do you have access to his email? I did. He never changed the passwords. Then look, there are letters to his lawyer from 6 months ago. He was planning the divorce in advance, consulting on how to leave you with nothing. In the car on the way home, Sarah logged into Michael's email from her phone. He really hadn't changed the password, so arrogant, Didn't think she was even capable of resistance. Folder. Attorneys. Correspondence with lawyer Simon Berg. Dates from 6 months ago, when she was 2 months pregnant. Simon, tell me, how can I keep maximum property in a divorce? My wife doesn't work, stays home. Can I prove everything was acquired by me? The attorney's response: we can, but better to hedge your bets. Take out loans in her name, if possible. In a divorce, those will be her debts and the property yours. The court will take her obligations into account during division. Next message, understood. And if she won't want to take out loans, then it's harder. But you could try through income statements. If you show she was also earning, later use those earnings as argument to justify her creditworthiness. Sarah read the correspondence and felt cold inside. So it was all planned: the pregnancy, the loans, the divorce. He'd calculated everything in advance. Wanted to leave her pregnant with $3 million in debt without a penny to her name. She saved all the correspondence, sent it to herself. Proof of premeditated fraud. That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay stroking her belly, feeling the baby move. Her child, who was supposed to be born to a bankrupt mother, crushed by debt, with a criminal father. But now everything would be different. Monday morning, Michael woke up in Christina's apartment. They'd celebrated his victory until 3 a.m. Champagne, expensive restaurant, gifts for Christina. He'd spent $20,000 in one evening, but he could afford it now. All the assets were his for million clean. His phone rang at 7 a.m. Michael irritably reached for the nightstand. Hello. Mr. Anderson, this is the collections department of First National Bank. You have an overdue debt on a loan totaling $900,000. Michael sat up in bed. What loan? I didn't take out a loan with your bank. The loan was taken out in the name of Sarah and Anderson. According to the court decision, all property registered in her name transferred to you, and with the property came the obligations. What property? What obligations? The apartment at your address. It was collateral for the loan. You accepted the apartment, therefore you accepted the debt obligations. Article 1692 of the Civil Code. This is some kind of mistake. I didn't accept anything. We have the court decision on the transfer of ownership. We expect payment of the debt within 3 days. Otherwise, we'll begin the collection process through the courts. Michael threw down the phone, his heart pounding. $900,000? What loan? The phone rang again. Second National Bank, then Third Federal, then 2 more banks. Everywhere the same thing. Overdue loans in Sarah's name, which were now considered his debts because he'd accepted the property. By 9 a.m., Michael understood the scale of the catastrophe. $3 million in debt. Interest and penalties had already accumulated to $3.5 million. And his assets were worth, at most, $3.5 million. And that was by realtor estimates. In reality, he could sell for maybe $3 million. He frantically called Sarah. Unavailable. Sent a message. What the hell? What loans? Undelivered. She'd blocked him. Christina woke up from his shouting. Michael, what happened? Shut up, he barked. She was offended, pouted, but said nothing. Michael paced the apartment, calling banks, demanding explanations. The explanations were simple. There were loan agreements. There were defaults. There was a court decision on property transfer. Pay the debts or prepare for legal collection. But I didn't know about these loans. Michael shouted into the phone. You should have checked before accepting the property. That's your obligation as the recipient. You accepted the property voluntarily by court order. The claims aren't against us. At 10 a.m., Michael rushed to his attorney, Simon Berg. He burst into the office without waiting, threw the bank printouts on the table. Simon, explain what this is. The attorney studied the documents. His face fell. Mr. Anderson, this is very bad. What's bad? Speak plainly. Your ex-wife took out loans in her name for $3 million. During the property division, you received everything that was registered in her name. And according to the Civil Code, when property transfers, the obligations associated with it also transfer. But I didn't know about the debts. That's your problem. You should have checked before accepting the property, made inquiries to banks, studied the liens. She deliberately didn't tell me. She wasn't obligated to. Moreover, the court asked her if she was voluntarily waiving the property. She confirmed. You were thrilled, remember? Recorded video of her signing the waivers. Michael collapsed into a chair. Images flashed through his mind. Sarah in the courtroom, calm, expressionless. Her words at the exit, "Congratulations. Now it's all truly yours." She knew. The whole time she knew. "Simon, what do I do?" "Pay the debts. There's no other way out." "But I don't have $3.5 million. Then the banks will file lawsuits, seize the assets, apartment, vacation home, cars, sell them at auction. If the proceeds aren't enough, you'll still owe the balance. I'm ruined." The attorney nodded. "Moreover, I've studied the agreements. Many of Sarah's signatures look suspicious. If she claims she didn't sign these agreements, there'll be forensic analysis. If forgery is confirmed, that's a criminal charge, fraud with a maximum of 20 years. "But I didn't." Michael stopped. The attorney looked at him carefully. "You didn't." Michael said nothing. Of course he did. Sarah had signed some agreements herself, trusting him. The rest he'd signed for her. Thought she'd never find out. After the divorce, he'd hang the debts on her. And he'd leave with Christina, start a new life. "Mr. Anderson, if there's forensic analysis and she proves forgery, you're facing up to 20 years in federal prison. I advise you to find a way to settle with your ex-wife. Maybe she'll agree not to file charges." Michael bolted from the attorney's office. His thoughts raced. Settle with Sarah? She wouldn't even answer the phone. He rushed to her rented room. A neighbor opened the door. "Sarah moved out 2 days ago. Don't know where." Michael called mutual acquaintances. No one knew where she was, or didn't want to say. By evening, Lisa called him. "Michael, this is Lisa, Sarah's friend. Sarah asked me to tell you, if you want to talk, come to the Old Town Cafe tomorrow at 3 p.m. Alone." The next day, Michael arrived at the cafe half an hour early, nervous, chain-smoking. Sarah appeared exactly at 3, in a simple dress with a small bag. Her pregnant belly had grown even larger. She sat across from him, ordered tea with milk. "What have you done?" Michael hissed, leaning across the table. "Protected myself and my child," Sarah answered calmly. "You deliberately planned everything. Gave away the property to hang the debts on me." "I gave you what you yourself registered in my name, along with the obligations you created. You signed the agreements, forging my signature. The forensic analysis confirmed it." Michael went pale. "What analysis?" Sarah pulled a folder from her bag, placed it on the table. "Handwriting analysis. 19 signatures, forgeries. Here's the expert's conclusion. And here are my medical records. On the dates 8 loans were taken out, I was hospitalized on bed rest. I physically couldn't have been at the bank. You've been gathering evidence for 2 months. Since I found out about the loans." Michael tried to collect himself. "Sarah, let's make a deal. I'll return half the property to you. We'll split the debts. I didn't mean to deceive you. The business was just in a tough spot." "You didn't spend $3 million on business," Sarah interrupted. $700,000 went to paying your personal debts. The rest went to Christina. An apartment for her, gifts, vacations. Here are the bank card statements. She laid out another stack of documents. Michael saw receipts, invoices, photographs. His hand with Christina's at a restaurant, their trips together, a ring on her finger. "You supported your mistress on my credit money," Sarah continued. "While I was pregnant, survived the threat of miscarriage. You were renting her an apartment for $3,000 a month. Tomorrow Lisa turns the materials over to the prosecutor's office. They'll open a criminal case under federal fraud statutes. fraud involving large amounts, up to 20 years. Michael grabbed her hand. Sarah, don't. I'm the father of your child. She freed her hand, stroked her belly. That's exactly why I'm doing this. My child won't grow up with a criminal father. Better no father at all. I'll return everything. I'll sell the apartment, the vacation home, pay off the debts. Too late. The banks have already filed lawsuits. Tomorrow the asset seizure begins. You're destroying my life. Sarah looked into his eyes. For the first time in many years, without fear, without pain, only with cold determination. You destroyed your own life when you forged my signatures, when you took out loans in my name, when you planned to leave me pregnant with $3 million in debt without a penny. Yes, I saw your correspondence with the attorney. 6 months ago, you'd already planned it all. Michael understood. She knew everything. Every step, every lie, every betrayal. What do you want? He asked hoarsely. Justice. For you to answer for your crimes. For other women to see that it's possible to protect yourself. That you can use the law against manipulators. She stood, placed money on the table for her tea. Goodbye, Michael. See you in court. He tried to hold her back, but she was already out of the cafe. Michael sat staring at the documents on the table. Forensic analysis, medical certificates, bank statements, correspondence with the attorney. She'd outplayed him completely. He'd thought she was helpless, dependent, broken. She'd methodically gathered evidence, studied laws, built her defense. And worst of all, she was right. By law, absolutely right. On Wednesday, marshals came to Michael. They sealed the apartment and vacation home, towed both cars right from his office parking lot, in front of employees and clients. Everyone watched, whispered. By Friday, the story had spread through business circles. Partners started breaking contracts. Suppliers demanded prepayment. Employees quit without waiting for the company to collapse. Christina found out about the debts from her friend who worked at a bank. She threw a fit. You promised a rich life, said we'd live well after the divorce, and you have $3 million in debt. Chrissy, wait, I'll fix everything. Fix what? You don't even have an apartment anymore. The marshals seized everything. You supported me on your pregnant wife's credit money. She packed her things right in front of him. Michael tried to stop her, begged, promised to solve the problems. But Christina was unmoved. Find yourself another fool who'll believe your promises. I need a successful man, not a bankrupt. A week later, Michael saw on social media her photograph embracing his competitor, Paul Stevens, owner of a chain of stores. On her finger sparkled an engagement ring. The betrayal from Christina hurt even more than the business collapse. 2 years of relationship, promises, plans for a future together. It all crumbled in a few days. Michael drank in the seized apartment. The marshals hadn't evicted him before the auction sale. He could live here, but the electricity and water had already been shut off for non-payment. His phone was flooded with calls from debt collectors. He stopped answering, just turned it off. On Monday, investigators from the FBI came to him. A criminal case has been opened on charges of fraud involving document forgery, the investigator read. Michael James Anderson, you are charged with committing a crime under federal fraud statutes. Fraud involving large amounts committed through document forgery. I didn't forge anything, Michael tried to defend himself. Forensic analysis confirmed that 19 signatures of Sarah Anderson were not executed by her, but by another person. On the dates 8 loans were taken out, Mrs. Anderson was in a hospital medical facility, which is documented. You also provided false income statements for Mrs. Anderson to obtain the loans. I was acting in the family's interest, saving the business. With the credit funds, you paid rent on an apartment for a third party, Christina Smith. You paid for her vacation abroad, purchased expensive gifts. That's not family interests. That's misappropriation of funds obtained fraudulently. The investigators showed statements, receipts, photographs. Everything was documented. Lisa had worked professionally. Every penny traced, every expenditure recorded. You are being given a measure of restraint in the form of a pledge not to leave the jurisdiction. Your passport is confiscated. Michael was photographed, fingerprinted. He signed a pile of papers, not really understanding what he was signing. His head was ringing. Criminal case, fraud up to 20 years. That evening he sat in the dark apartment without electricity, drinking vodka straight from the bottle, remembering how just a week ago he was celebrating victory in a restaurant, laughing at Sarah, calling her an idiot. And she turned out to be smarter, much smarter. His phone, turned on for a minute, vibrated. Message from an unknown number. Justice is slow, but inevitable. Take care of yourself. Sarah. Michael hurled the phone at the wall. The trial was scheduled for 2 months later. During that time, Michael's life turned into hell. The apartment sold at auction for $1.8 million, half the market value. The vacation home for $600,000. The cars went for pennies. Total proceeds, $2.3 million. Of that, $2 million went to pay the bank debts. The remaining $1.5 million still hung on Michael, plus interest that continued to accrue. He rented a room in a boarding house for $800 a month. The company went bankrupt, employees scattered. His reputation in business circles was destroyed. No one wanted to deal with a fraudster. His mother came to see him, crying. Michael, how could you deceive your pregnant wife, steal money? I didn't steal. I took loans in her name. By forging signatures. That's a crime, son. A crime. Michael couldn't explain, even to himself, how he'd gotten to this point. First, one loan for business, saving from IRS penalties. Then a second, a third. Signing for Sarah became routine. She didn't understand finances anyway, stayed home, cooked soup. Why bother her? Then Christina appeared. Young, vibrant, ambitious. She wanted the good life. Michael wanted to give it to her. So he took more loans for an apartment for her, for gifts, for vacations. He convinced himself he'd pay it all back later, that the business would take off, money would come, and he'd just divorce Sarah, leave her with the minimum. She wouldn't go anywhere anyway, without work, without money. But Sarah turned out not to be who he thought she was. The day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Michael saw journalists, bloggers, activists with signs. Justice for women. Fraudsters must face justice. The story had hit the media a week ago. Headlines blazed. Pregnant woman outsmarts fraudster husband. How a wife used the law against a cheater. The legal trap. One divorce story. Public opinion was on Sarah's side. Women's forums discussed her strategy, admired her intelligence and composure. Michael was portrayed as a villain, a traitor, a criminal. He sat at the defendant's table in a cheap suit. Next to him sat a court-appointed attorney, not Simon Berg, who declined the case. A new attorney, young, inexperienced. All rise, court is in session. Judge Maria Reynolds entered the courtroom, the same judge who'd handled their divorce. She surveyed the room, looked at Michael. Disappointment showed in her eyes. We are here for the criminal case against Michael James Anderson, charged with committing a crime under federal fraud statutes, she began. The prosecutor stood, a woman in her 40s, stern with a hard gaze. Your Honor, Mr. Anderson is charged with fraud involving large amounts. Between 2022 and 2024, he took out 22 loan agreements in his wife Sarah and Anderson's name, totaling $3 million. 19 signatures purporting to be from Mrs. Anderson were not executed by her, but by the defendant, as confirmed by forensic handwriting analysis. The prosecutor read the charges. Michael listened as if hearing a sentence. Every word hit him. The fraudulently obtained funds were spent by the defendant on personal needs, supporting his mistress, purchasing expensive gifts, paying for vacations abroad. At the time the loans were taken out, Mrs. Anderson was pregnant in a vulnerable position. The defendant took advantage of this. The judge nodded. Defendant, do you plead guilty? Michael stood. His attorney had advised partial admission, Show remorse, ask for leniency. It might reduce the sentence. I plead partially guilty, he said hoarsely. I did take out loans in my wife's name, but not with intent to defraud. I was saving the business, trying to preserve the family. By paying for your mistress's apartment, you were preserving your family. The prosecutor interrupted coldly. That was later, when the relationship had already broken down. Your relationship with Christina Smith began 2 years ago, according to witness testimony. At that time, your wife was pregnant with your first child. That pregnancy ended in miscarriage. Do you connect these events? Michael was silent. What could he say? That he hadn't thought about his wife then, about her feelings? That he didn't care? The judge looked at him with a long gaze, calling the witness for the prosecution, Sarah and Anderson. Sarah entered the courtroom. Her pregnant belly at 7 months was very noticeable. She moved slowly, supporting her lower back, sat in the witness chair. Michael looked at her and didn't recognize her. This wasn't the cowed, frightened woman he'd humiliated in recent years. This was a strong, self-assured person. Back straight, gaze firm, voice calm. The prosecutor began questioning. Mrs. Anderson, tell the court about your relationship with the defendant. Sarah took a deep breath. We met 8 years ago. I'd just finished paralegal training, was working at a law firm. Michael was developing his business. The first 3 years were good. Then everything changed. She spoke calmly, without drama, simply stating facts. How Michael convinced her to quit her job, how the affair started, how he humiliated her in front of friends, made her feel worthless. I tried to get pregnant, thought a baby would save the marriage, but there were 2 miscarriages. Doctors said it was from stress. Michael didn't hide his affairs, came home with evidence of other women on his clothes. I lived in constant nervous tension. The courtroom listened in rapt silence. Journalists scribbled notes. Activists wiped away tears. When I finally got pregnant and carried to 4 months, Michael announced the divorce. He said, "You've served your time." Those words I'll remember my whole life. Michael cringed on the bench, remembering that conversation. He really had said that, crudely, cruelly, not thinking about her feelings. Then the divorce proceedings began, Sarah continued. Michael demanded to keep all the property. I agreed, not because I was afraid or gave up, but because by then I already knew about the loans. The judge leaned forward. How did you find out? By accident. A bank called me, had the wrong number, mentioned a default on a $900,000 loan. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I started checking. I reached out to my friend Lisa. She's an investigator. Lisa helped me gather information. Sarah pulled a folder from her bag. Here are all the loan agreements. Here's the forensic handwriting analysis. 19 forgeries. 3 genuine. Those I signed at my husband's request, trusting him. He said it was for the IRS, a formality. I believed him. She showed medical certificates. On the dates 8 loans were taken out, I was hospitalized on bed rest to prevent miscarriage. Here are the statements from medical facilities. I physically couldn't have been at the bank. The prosecutor took the documents, passed them to the judge. Michael saw the judge studying the papers, frowning. What did you feel when you found out about the loans? The prosecutor asked. Sarah paused, choosing her words. At first, shock. $3 million in debt in my name. I'm without work, pregnant, about to give birth. These debts could have destroyed my entire life. Then came fear, then anger. And then I remembered that I'm a paralegal, and I started thinking about how to protect myself through legal means. Tell us about your plan. Sarah stroked her belly. I studied the law. Article 1692 of the Civil Code states that when property rights transfer, the obligations associated with that property also transfer. I understood that if Michael got all the property in the divorce, he'd also get the debts. His greed would work against him. A murmur went through the courtroom. Journalists recorded every word. I wasn't seeking revenge, Sarah continued firmly. I was defending myself, protecting myself and my future child. Michael forged my signatures, took out huge debts in my name, was planning to leave me with those debts without a penny. I simply used the law to return responsibility for his actions back to him. She looked at Michael for the first time during the entire hearing, looked directly into his eyes. You thought I was weak, that I had nowhere to go, that I'd endure anything, but I had a reason to be strong. She stroked her belly again. My child shouldn't have had to grow up with a criminal father in poverty, under the burden of someone else's debts. I did what I had to do. Any mother would protect her child. Michael's attorney tried to attack, but you manipulated the court process, deliberately didn't report the debts. I wasn't obligated to report them, Sarah answered calmly. Michael should have checked the property himself before accepting it. That's his legal obligation. I didn't violate a single statute. I used my legal knowledge for self-defense. The judge nodded. That's correct. Mrs. Anderson acted within the law. The next witnesses were bank employees. They confirmed Michael had personally brought documents, rushed the processing, said his wife was busy, he was acting on her behalf, though there was no power of attorney. The handwriting expert gave his conclusion. 19 signatures were not executed by Sarah Anderson, but by another person, presumably male. Characteristic differences in pressure, slant, letter elements. Hospital doctors confirmed Sarah was in inpatient treatment on the specified dates. Couldn't leave. Strict bed rest required. Lisa testified as a witness, told about the investigation. We found correspondence between the defendant and his attorney dated 6 months prior. They discussed a plan to take out maximum loans in his wife's name, then divorce and leave her with the debts. Here are printouts of the correspondence. She handed the documents to the court. Michael covered his face with his hands. This correspondence killed any remaining chance of leniency. It proved premeditation, intent. The prosecutor read Michael's letters to the attorney. Can I leave my wife with the debts in a divorce? How do I take out loans so she doesn't find out? After the divorce, the apartment and vacation home will be mine, and the debt's hers. This isn't an attempt to save a business. This is a planned scam against his own pregnant wife, the prosecutor stated. Lisa continued. We also found correspondence with Christina Smith. Here's a message. I'll leave her with nothing. The apartment, vacation home, all ours. Let her sit with the baby in a studio apartment while we live well. The defendant promised his mistress a life together at the expense of ruining his pregnant wife. The courtroom buzzed with outrage. Activists shouted something. The judge called for order. Michael sat there, understanding it was over. Every piece of evidence, every witness was destroying him. Premeditation, cruelty, cynicism, all displayed for everyone to see. He remembered Sarah's words at the cafe. You destroyed your own life. She was right. The prosecutor gave her closing statement. Your Honor, we have before us not an impulsive crime. This is a planned multi-step scam. The defendant exploited his wife's trust, her vulnerable position as a pregnant woman. He forged her signature 22 times, fraudulently obtained $3 million, spent that money on his own comfort and supporting his mistress. He planned to abandon his wife with a newborn, leaving her only with debts. This is a crime against family, against motherhood, against humanity itself. I request the maximum sentence, 20 years in federal prison, full restitution to the victim and banks, prohibition from engaging in business activity for 5 years after release. Michael's attorney tried to soften. My client has admitted partial guilt, shows remorse. He's prepared to make restitution, asks the court to consider that he was acting under difficult life circumstances. What difficult circumstances? The prosecutor interrupted. He had a successful business, an apartment, a vacation home, cars. The difficult circumstances were experienced by his pregnant wife. whom he deceived and robbed. The judge retired to deliberate, an agonizing hour of waiting. Michael sat staring at the floor. Sarah waited in the corridor, Lisa beside her for support. Finally, the judge returned. Everyone stood. The court has deliberated and, having considered all circumstances of the case, issues the following verdict, she began. Michael James Anderson is found guilty of committing a crime under federal fraud statutes. Michael swayed. His attorney steadied him by the elbow. The sentence is 18 years in federal prison. The court also orders Anderson to pay banks $1.5 million in remaining debt and to pay Sarah and Anderson $1 million in compensation for emotional distress. Anderson is stripped of parental rights to the future child as presenting a threat to the child's safety and well-being. He is prohibited from engaging in business activity for 5 years after release. Michael collapsed onto the bench. 18 years in prison. Parental rights stripped. $1.5 million in debt he'd be paying for life. Then suddenly the judge stood and, unexpectedly for everyone, began applauding while looking at Sarah. The courtroom froze in astonishment. Then the judge spoke. Mrs. Anderson, I'm breaking protocol, but I must say this. In 30 years of judicial practice, I've seen hundreds of women broken, crushed, destroyed by manipulators like the defendant. They endured, stayed silent, were afraid. You showed that it's possible to defend yourself. You used the law without violating it. You were smarter, stronger, wiser than your abuser. You protected yourself and your future child. Thank you for showing other women that justice is achievable. You just have to not be afraid to fight for it. The entire courtroom rose in applause. Journalists captured the unique scene on camera, a judge giving a standing ovation to the victim. Sarah struggled to hold back tears. Lisa hugged her shoulders. Activists chanted, "Thank you, Sarah. You're a hero." Guards were leading Michael away. He turned back one last time. Sarah looked into his eyes without anger, without triumph. She just looked and quietly said, so only he could hear, "You chose this path yourself." 6 months later, Sarah stood on the balcony of her new apartment. 3 bedrooms, bright, in a good neighborhood, purchased with money from her great-aunt's inheritance. The inheritance had been finalized a week after that trial. $18 million after taxes. She took over the Farm Plus pharmacy chain. The business flourished under her management. Her legal training helped. She knew all the intricacies of laws, taxes, contracts. In 6 months, she'd opened 3 more pharmacies. But most importantly, she'd given birth. A healthy baby boy, 8 pounds 6 ounces. She named him Matthew. Her great-aunt had dreamed of having a Matthew in the family. Now the baby slept in his crib by the window, a tiny miracle, making little snuffling sounds in his sleep. Sarah looked at him and understood that everything she'd been through was worth it for this moment. Fear, humiliation, struggle, all for this. The doorbell rang. Lisa with cake and sparkling cider. "Anniversary of the court decision," she announced, coming in. "We should celebrate." They sat on the balcony, drinking tea. Sarah was still breastfeeding. No alcohol allowed. Lisa shared news. Michael's serving his sentence at a federal facility in Pennsylvania. Works in the prison factory, earns pennies. His mother visits, once a month, cries. Friends forgot about him. Christina married his competitor, had a daughter, lives in Spain now. "How is he?" Sarah asked. "Bitter, blames you for everything. Tells his cellmates his wife set him up. They don't sympathize. Most of them are in for real crimes. They think he's pathetic for robbing his pregnant wife." Sarah sighed. She didn't feel sorry for him. He'd chosen this path himself. Every forged signature, every loan, every lie. "You know what's most surprising?" Lisa said, "You've become a symbol. Women write to you, ask for advice, want to know how to protect themselves from manipulators." "I started a charitable foundation," Sarah admitted, "protecting motherhood. Free legal consultations for women in difficult situations. Psychological help. You'll be the legal director. Lisa beamed. I already submitted my resignation from the police force. Of course I will. They hugged. Matthew woke up, cried. Sarah picked him up, began rocking him. The baby calmed down, nestled into her shoulder. You know, people ask if you regret being so harsh with Michael, Lisa said. Sarah looked at her son. I wasn't harsh, I was just. He committed a crime, faced punishment. I protected myself and my child through legal means. That's not cruelty, that's self-defense. What if he hadn't forged signatures? If he'd just cheated, humiliated, but not committed a crime? Sarah thought about it. I would have left anyway. Maybe not as dramatically, but I would have left. Because I understood the main thing. No one deserves humiliation. Not one woman should endure, hoping he'll change. We should change, become stronger, protect ourselves, leave those who don't value us. Lisa raised her cup. To justice. To justice, Sarah repeated. They drank their tea. Matthew fell asleep in his mother's arms. The city sparkled with lights outside the window. Sarah remembered the judge's words. You showed that justice is achievable. Yes, achievable. Not always quickly, not always easily, but achievable. She stroked her son's head. He would never know his father, never see him, never hear from him. And that was right, because children should grow up in love, respect, and safety, not with someone capable of forging his pregnant wife's signatures for his own gain. You know, sometimes the greatest victory is simply living happily, Sarah said aloud. And you are living happily, Lisa smiled. Sarah looked at her sleeping son, at her apartment, at her friend beside her, at her new life built on the ruins of the old one. Yes, she agreed. I am. And somewhere far away, in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, Michael lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, thinking about the apartment he'd lost, the business that collapsed, Christina who left, the wife who outplayed him. She deliberately planned it all, he thought bitterly. But even in his own thoughts, he couldn't admit the main thing. She hadn't planned it. She defended herself against him, against his greed, against his cruelty. And the law sided with her because the law protects the innocent, and he was guilty on all counts. In 3 years, he'd get out with a criminal record, without money, with debts of $1.5 million. He'd be 38. He'd have to start from zero, if anyone even gave him a chance to start. Sarah would be 33, with a son in school, with a successful business, with a new life. Justice had prevailed, slowly through courts and laws, but it prevailed. And that's what matters most.